This seems warranted. Hey everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on the second annual Husbando and Waifu bracket of 2023. And ooh, yeah, there we go. Ha-ha! Tuzza! Cheers! So we're on the second annual, I haven't even started drinking yet. Second annual Husbando and Waifu bracket of 2023. Round two! The top 32 to the Sweet 16. And I felt like I was gonna need this because I'm not gonna lie, y'all. Oh, that's good. This second round, I thought the first one was gonna be pretty bad. When I picked the bad boy criteria for the first round in last week's video, I was like, oh, that's going to narrow down some things. It's going to knock some people out. It's going to be pretty bad. But I thought, you know what? From here on in, we just get through the hard stuff. It'll get easier, right? No. So in this second round, we are narrowing down the top 32 husbandos voted by Patreon for 2023 and narrowing down to our Sweet 16. As we did last round, there are going to be 3 criteria that are going to determine the winners of these rounds. Now, obviously, the outlier, there's technically 4 criteria, but the outlier is aesthetically pleasing. All of these husbandos, all of these waifus, they're aesthetically pleasing. Why wouldn't they be? Why would they be nominated otherwise? So we have 3 criteria per round to narrow down our choices, and the criteria are different per round. And these criteria were voted on by patrons. So the brackets, patrons. The criteria, patrons. I'm just the poor soul that you all have decided to watch suffer through these choices and figure out who's going to advance on into the top husbando, top waifu. So this round is exceptionally difficult for a number of reasons. One, the criteria being chosen did not help at all. But 2, because there was actually still a lot of really hard decisions to make. I will say that I relied upon Patreon votes as a tiebreaker a lot in the last round, and I was not happy with that. I was like, no, I don't want to have to rely on Patreon to break the ties every single time. So with that being said, for this round, I only ended up doing it a few select times, and that was it. I have decided, though, that for the next round, which will be the Sweet 16 into the top 8, or if I have to in the top 8 to the finals, if I do have a tie that I can't break, I will probably go to our philanthropy tier on Patreon and ask those individuals to help me. It may not happen. It may happen. If it does, I will message those individuals, or I will put out a special poll just for the philanthropy tier and let them know, and that way they can help me vote. So we'll see if that ends up happening. It may be from here on a clean sweep, but I'll tell y'all, for this round right here, the top 32 to the top 16, it was a bloodbath. And I really hope y'all forgive me, because there's some on here I was like, oh no. I had to dig deep for some of these. So let's get into it, shall we? We're going to talk about the criteria for this round specifically. Obviously, aesthetically pleasing applies to every individual in this round, but there were 3 criteria patrons voted on that they wanted their husbandos and waifus to have. And I thought these 3 went together really well. First, they have to be intelligent. We want our partner to be intelligent, make smart decisions, and if we can't make smart decisions, we want them to back us up. So they had to be intelligent. 2, they had to be trustworthy and dependable, meaning that I can rely upon them to help me in a pinch, and others can rely upon them as well and depend on them if the going gets tough. And 3, they have to have a strong individualistic personality. It's cool to be somebody that wants to have a partner and, agree with each other and, be cooperative and stuff, but you don't want somebody that's clingy. And you don't want somebody that is codependent and needs you all the time. So we want somebody that can stand on their own 2 feet and be individualistic, right? Right, that surely, those 3 categories, those 3 criteria, no problems whatsoever, right? So I'm going to tell y'all that this round gave me many a sleepless night. And we're going to start off here with our husbandos for the top husbando of 2023. Let's get into it, shall we? I thought that it would get easier because I was like, oh, well, we weeded out the outliers. So we've got down some good choices here. And it just did the opposite. It made things even harder. And there's some decisions that I really was sad about, this being one of them. It was Reagan Arataka versus Sasaki from Sasaki to Miyano. two characters, two redheads that I really, really like. Is Reagan a redhead or is he more like a strawberry blonde? Could be both. I feel for these characters because I like both of them, and they both have dark-headed guys standing opposite of them that they get along with quite well, right? But if we're looking at Reigen Arataka versus Sasaki, then obviously aesthetically pleasing for both. I would say that Reigen, despite Reigen being a con man, he is trustworthy and dependable. If you've watched Mob Psycho, you know that he's trustworthy and dependable, and that he's somebody that you can watch out for. Obviously, I forget to mention this every single time I record, but spoilers abound for this entire video for the plots of the series that these characters are in, just so y'all know. I'll put something in before this moment to let you all know, but spoilers abound. From watching Mob Psycho, we know that Reigen is dependable and trustworthy. He's just kind of a con man and comes across. He's a shrewd businessman, but he means well, right? Has a heart of gold. And Sasaki kind of runs into the same thing, where he seems like a delinquent, but he is trustworthy and dependable, right? I would say Sasaki and Reigen can be individualistic, although you could argue that Sasaki does really kind of cling to Miyano a lot. He doesn't have to. He is shown by himself in the manga or in the anime. I'm anime only with Sasaki to Miyano, but he does cling to Miyano quite a bit. Whereas Reigen can go off and do his own thing and be kind of all right. So for me, the tiebreaker really came down to Reigen versus Sasaki and seeing who is the more intelligent person. And Sasaki, I think it's more of an experience and age matter, but Reigen is, I think, the more intelligent person. He's just got more years of experience. He's a businessman. He's a shrewd con man, but you can't say he's not smart. So he's got street smarts, if anything. So because of that, as much as I love Sasaki, I have to give this round to Reigen. He's our winner and will advance to our Sweet 16. For our next round, we have Tengen from Demon Slayer versus Wei Wuxian from Modao Zushi. I think this is a really good example of a character that in last year's poll I didn't have a lot of information about, so I couldn't make the best decisions about them. And now coming back, having watched Demon Slayer Season 2, I can make a more informed decision. This one's really hard though, because you have Tengen and Wei Wuxian, who are both very strong individualistic characters. They can act on their own. They can go do reconnaissance missions. You could argue that Tengen is devoted to his wives, and that could be a problem, but you could say the same thing for Wei Wuxian and Lan Wangji. So they're kind of on even footing with that. They're both intelligent, very smart, very strategic, very clever, and they're both aesthetically pleasing. So it really comes down with the trustworthy and dependable part. And this is where it gets tough. Because if you look at them right now, in the present time with both of their stories, you could say that, yeah, both Tengen and Wei Wuxian are trustworthy and dependable. But I didn't want to rely on Patreon for all of these polls. And so instead, what I did was think, okay, well, what about in the past? And what we know about Tengen is that he's always been a trustworthy and reliable, dependable person for everyone around him. With Wei Wuxian, there are times in his past where he kind of goes off and does his own thing and just kind of leaves people as the Yiling Patriarch. He doesn't listen. He does his own thing. Now, obviously, he, learns from that and changes his ways moving forward into the present, but he wasn't always somebody that you could necessarily depend upon at every single time. And I think that's part of his character development. It makes me like Wuxian more because of how far he comes. But if we're looking at Husbandos, I don't know if I want Wei Wuxian to be going. I don't know about that past, right? And that's really the only difference between Tengen and him, honestly. It was going to come down to that or Patreon. And I was like, I wanted to, in this round, not rely upon Patreon votes to break the tie. So looking into their past, I would say that Tengen has always had that trustworthy and dependable streak with everyone he's been around versus Wei Wuxian, who had moments of doubt there in regards to that category. So it was really hard. And I was like sitting there going, am I really doing this? But yes, I'm going to take our boy Tengen and advance him onto the Sweet 16 over Wei Wuxian. At that point, I was 2 rounds in and I'm like, we're already having trouble. It's all downhill from here, y'all. It's all downhill from here. Speaking of downhill from here, Kazuma Soma from Fruits Basket versus Jeha from Yona of the Dawn. This round was pretty easy for me, honestly. Both Jeha and Kazuma aesthetically pleasing. They're both very intelligent. I would say they're both trustworthy and dependable characters. It really comes down to the personalities of them being strong and individualistic. It's kind of hard because we don't get as much with Kazuma as we do Jeha. That's probably the biggest problem for me, is that with Kazuma, he's kind of in the background behind Kyo, behind the others, as more of a support character, whereas Jeha is front and center as one of the dragons. So we get a lot more examples of Jeha's strong individualistic personality than we do with Kazuma. And Jeha's kind of thing throughout the whole story, at least the first couple volumes he's in, is that he is an individual character. He doesn't want to work with anybody else. He has that individualistic personality. But then when you get to know Jeha, you realize that he is trustworthy. So, and you can depend upon him. So because we have more examples content-wise of Jeha checking off the boxes of all these categories, I'm going to give it to Jeha over Kazuma Soma, and Jeha from Yona the Dawn is going to advance into the Sweet 16. Well deserved. Jeha's one of the better ones. Next up, I love both of these characters, and so this is one of the first rounds that I spent a lot of time thinking about. It's Otasaku from Bungo Stray Dogs versus Haiji Kiyose from Roam with the Wind. Y'all, this is really hard. It's really hard because both Otasaku and Haiji are smart. They're really intelligent, and they're trustworthy and dependable. Even though Otasaku's working for the Port Mafia, he's known for being trustworthy and dependable. People know he's good. And the fact that he would drop everything to go and help you is just, especially if he's somebody that he cares about. It's like, and they're just totally different characters and totally different stories. It makes it so hard, right? But I would say the thing for me is that Otasaku can not only be relied upon by the Port Mafia to get the job done, but civilians like the kids at the diner, they, could rely upon him to bring them supplies and resources, right? So there is that, whereas Haiji really only has his team as comparison. And so it makes it really hard. It's like comparing apples and oranges, right? And as far as strong individualistic personalities, I would say both Otasaku and Haiji, they both have moments of doubt with themselves. But in the end, I think what settled it for me is having a strong individualistic personality. I think in the end, Oda is able to go and make choices by himself and enact things individually that are on his terms, whereas Haiji relies more upon his group and his team for help. And in the long run, you can argue, like, is that better? Is it not? It was so hard, y'all. And if you disagree with me on this one, I don't blame you. I was heartbroken, but Otasaku's my man. He's my man. So, Otasaku's my dude, and I had to give it to him. So, knocking out these top seeds. I tell y'all, knocking out these top seeds. But Haiji Kiyose, you are my favorite character in Roam with the Wind. I love him so much, but Otasaku's my favorite character in Bungo Stray Dogs too. I feel like Otasaku has a more variety of examples that back up his reasoning than Haiji does. So for that reason, Otasaku is going to advance to the Sweet 16. Now, these rounds don't get easier, let me tell you. Hua Chong versus Chuya from Heaven Official's Blessing and Bungo Stray Dogs respectively. You all expect me to judge these things. I mean, both aesthetically pleasing to the max, both super intelligent, trustworthy and dependable, and very individualistic and strong personalities. But here's the thing. Hua Chong would literally bend the world for you. And you could argue that Chuya would as well, but Chuya needs one specific person to stop him. I guess you could argue that Hua Chong does as well. I guess you could argue that too, but here's the thing. Hua Chong is a supreme ghost king, and Chuya is a king of sheep. I gotta go with the supreme ghost king. I feel like Chuya oftentimes relies upon Dazai to keep him in check, but Hua Chong is able to help keep Shi Lian in check. So for that reason, I've got to take Hua Chong over Chuya. But that's a sucker of a round. Hua Chong is going to be a hard one to beat, if I'm being honest. But we'll cross that mortal ghost realm when we get to it, right? But Hua Chong is going to advance to our Sweet 16. Next up, we have Kaoru versus Akihiko. Kaoru from Neon Genesis and Akihiko from Given. This one was rather difficult because they're very opposite characters. There's not a lot of similarities between them, whereas Chuya and Hwachong actually had quite a lot in common. Kaoru and Akihiko, not so much. So I actually had to go to Discord to ask about Kaoru. I asked, would you say that Kaoru is a trustworthy and dependable person? And the people on the Discord were like, It was kind of like a Gojo response. It was like, well, I think one of my favorite ways to phrase it, and I don't remember if it was Melania or Isabel or who said this specifically, but they said, I love Kaoru, but he's quite difficult. I was like, I feel that is my problem. If we were doing like an aesthetically pleasing category all by itself, Kaoru would be doing great. He would probably beat out Akihiko. But in this case, there's a hesitant no for Kaoru with trustworthy and dependable, whereas we know Akihiko is someone you can rely upon. He goes through some dark times. It takes him a little while to get there, and you could argue that that's kind of the same logic with Wei Wuxian, but I think that whereas Tengen was a much stronger candidate versus Wei Wuxian, I don't know if Kaoru's that stronger candidate against Akihiko. So I think if you look at in the current time, Akihiko is trustworthy and dependable, has a strong individualistic personality, whereas Kaoru, the fact that it's questionable whether he's trustworthy is to his detriment. So Kaoru is one of my favorites in Neon Genesis. I would say I'd argue he's one of my favorites over Akihiko, but if we're going by the categories, Akihiko is going to advance to our Sweet 16. So next, Masaki from Tsurune versus Ash Lynx from Banana Fish. I love Masaki. Masaki is a great character. He's one of my favorites in Tsurune. He definitely is winning the Husbando category in terms of the looks, like no question. But here's the thing. Ash, to his discredit, does lunge headfirst into any challenge rather than run away from it. So he's almost dependable to a fault. That's the thing about Ash. He is like so dependable that it's almost to his detriment. But if he cares for you, you can trust him with anything, and he is going to be there for you to rely upon. And that's not to say that Masaki is not reliable, but I do think that Banana Fish gives us so many examples of Ash being someone that others can depend upon and him changing so many others around him. Not to say Masaki doesn't do that for Minato and some of the others, but I feel like Masaki's like in a coach role, so it's almost expected. Ash is in a leader role, but he's part of like a gang and a mafia, so him being so trustworthy almost seems kind of counterintuitive to the role that he plays, right? So, and Ash has amazing street smarts. Masaki, he can be a little aloof sometimes, but Ash is like always on point, right? Super smart, has an amazing IQ, super trustworthy and dependable, and has a strong individualistic personality. Like Ash was just checking off every box with a giant Sharpie, whereas Masaki was checking them off with a fine point pen. So for that reason, Ash Lynx, he's going to advance to the Sweet 16, but Masaki, we will miss you. You're one of my faves. I had to remind myself that if Nanami Kento had made it past round 1, he would be facing Yuta in this round. And I had instant regrets. Mm-hmm. Instant regrets. Because it's Yuta from Jujutsu Kaisen versus Sebastian Moran from Moriarty the Patriot. Damn it. This round wasn't hard for me because I'm like, what's interesting is, Gojo lets Yuta go on solo missions, so he clearly is trustworthy and dependable. I don't know as much about Yuta only from the movie and from the scant times we've seen him in season 1. I'm sure after season 2, my views will have changed a lot on Yuta. But he lets him go on missions and solo ones. But with Moran, I feel like Moran always has someone with him. I don't feel like Moran individually goes and does things. I feel like he always has Louis with him, or he has like Fred, or he has somebody from Moriarty's crew that is with him, or Bond. Like someone is with Moran on missions. He's not really allowed to do like solo projects. Whereas Yuta, for all we know, spends most of season 1 by himself. So they're both intelligent. They're both characters that I feel have strong individualistic personalities, but Yuta, I feel like him being able to go solo more gives him a slight edge over Sebastian Moran. Now, if it had been Nanami versus him, woulda, coulda, shouldas, right? whatever. We're going to have Yuta go ahead and go on to the Sweet 16. A youngin' going on. So, Lan Wangji starts out our next round. Him versus Aizawa from My Hero Academia. This one's rather difficult because I would argue that both Aizawa and Lan Wangji are very intelligent. They both have strong individualistic personalities. They can do things on their own, sure, but they also like to rely on others, so they're very similar in that regard. And then they both are trustworthy and dependable. They can be teachers. They can be leaders. They actually have surprisingly very similar personalities. But again, I did not want to rely upon Patreon to be a tiebreaker in this, so I'm like, well, what else can I do relating to these criteria that will separate Lan Wangji from Aizawa or vice versa? And for me, it came down to the sheer fact that Lan Wangji has specifically gone out of his way to be individually strong, trustworthy, and dependable for a canon romantic partner. Because this is a husbando poll. It's a husbando contest. So at the end of the day, they have to be characters that will be strong for a romantic partner. And I feel like Lan Wangji kind of covers all the bases with that, right? I feel like all the things he's done for Wei Wuxian, it works out. Whereas Aizawa, we can say he's shipped with Present Mike or Midnight or All Might or whoever all day long, but there's not one canon partner for Aizawa. So I wanted to go with the one to win this round that had a specific canon partner that we could have examples tied to. That's Lan Wangji. He's going to advance on to the Sweet 16. Going back to Modao Zushi as well, we have Zhang Chong from Modao Zushi versus Levi Ackerman from Attack on Titan. What two sour grapes to go up next to one another, right? I feel like both Chang and Levi are intelligent in their own ways. I would almost argue that Levi may be a little bit more intelligent, at least as far as military strategy is concerned. We don't get a lot of MXTX text about how smart Chang is. Obviously smart enough because he takes over the Zhang clan, but I feel like Levi gets a chance to prove his intellect more in battle than Chang does. I feel like that's the case. Also, Levi is able to defend people and be trustworthy as Chang is. But I would say, honestly, what's interesting is that both Chang and Levi have their own internal struggles throughout the series that they're in. But I feel like Levi is given more opportunity to be a leader and show us his strong individual personality and his trustworthy and dependableness and his dependability more than Chang. I feel like Levi is given a chance to be in the limelight a little bit more than Chang and show us those examples more fluently. So they're actually surprisingly very similar characters, but I'm going to give this one to Levi. I think he kind of has it, even though they're the 5 and 4 seed. I think Levi wins it and goes on to the Sweet 16. So there are 5. These next 5 rounds. The last round wasn't hard. These next 5 rounds of Husbandos, the reason I'm recording this so late is because I had to spend days thinking about this. Because these 5 rounds coming up were so difficult to decide. I sat and went back and forth for days. I was sitting at work being like, well, what if it was this? What if it was that? I would get on Discord and ask questions and be like, well, does that really help me? So there's going to be some upsets throughout these next rounds, but I had to stick to my guns and stick to the criteria. So all I can say is I hope you all have a drink handy, because I feel like if you all filled out a bracket beforehand, this is going to tear some of them up. I intentionally made the bracket and put it out on Patreon and YouTube without the criteria because I was curious to see what people would pick before the criteria was announced, because that changes everything, right? The criteria changes everything, and I kind of like that. But round 1 is Sawamura Eijun from Ace of the Diamond versus Kaji Ryoji from Neon Genesis. If we were basing this just on looks, I'd be like, sorry, Sawamura. If we were just basing it on aesthetically pleasing, Kaji, he has the sex appeal, the bad boy persona. He would win any day, but that's not the criteria this round is asking for. So I had to treat it fairly. So our criteria is aesthetically pleasing, intelligent, trustworthy, dependable, and strong individualistic personalities. Now, where we look at intelligence at, obviously Kaji kind of has a step up over Sawamura. Sawamura is not dumb, But Kaji has, I think, a little bit more overall intelligence. So he kind of gets that category there, right? I would say as far as being strong individualistic characters, they both are. Like Saomura changes himself in Ace of the Diamond. He gets help from others, sure, but he very much is the catalyst of his own change. Same with Kaji. Kaji gets help from other people too, but he kind of is, in charge of his own agenda. So they're kind of on even footing in terms of being strong individual personalities. So then when it comes to trustworthiness and dependability, in terms of that, I went to the Discord and I asked people about Kaji. Would you say Kaji is trustworthy and dependable? And that was all I asked. And on Discord, people were like, well, I mean, I guess if he really cared about you, sure. But there was, again, that hesitancy, right? They're like, Kaji seems like he's more for himself, but I guess if you're going to help him and you're caught up in that, I guess it'll work out, right? So there was that. Whereas Saomura, he is trustworthy and dependable. He will lay down life and limb for you and will do so for multiple characters. So I was kind of at an impasse. You had the trustworthy and dependability of Saomura, the intelligence of Kaji, and they're both strong individual characters. So what do we do in this case? So the question becomes, of the two, who would be the better husbando? And based on that criteria, I know that he's just barely of age, but I think it would be Saomura. I think Kaji would be a fun fling. He'd be a great fling to be with, but as far as settling down as a husbando, I don't know if I'd pick him over Saomura. And that doubt, as much as I love Kaji, he's one of my favorites from Neon Genesis, that doubt made me put Saomura Eijun in the win. So Ao Saomura, he's going to the Sweet 16. As he should, as our ace should. Speaking of Ace of the Diamond, next round, it's Miyuki Kazuya versus L. Our two strong strategists, right? Looking into both series, Miyuki is the catcher that knows it all, and L is the greatest detective. So, God, it's hard to pick between these two. It really is, because they're both smart. I mean, I say they're both intelligent. Like, Miyuki is one of the best catchers in the entire league. L is the best, if not one of the best detectives in all of Death Note. So they're both very, very intelligent. As far as having strong individual personalities, Miyuki almost pushes people away. He's so individualistic. Same thing with L. Same thing with his personality. L wants to do things by himself. Miyuki wants to take charge and be in charge of the situation. They're both quite similar in terms of that, surprisingly. So then it comes down to trustworthy and dependability. And that's where Miyuki and L get a little bit separated for me, because I do think that L, you can trust him to solve a case on his terms. And you can trust L to solve a case and do the best that he can with what he's given. And Miyuki, I feel as if Miyuki is trustworthy and dependable in the same aspect. But here's my thing. I feel like Miyuki, in terms of being a captain, we are able in Ace of the Diamond to see more examples of him being trustworthy and dependable with a variety of characters. Whereas with L, we see him with the task force, sure, but there's even times where he kind of dismisses the task force and just does his own thing. And we don't get as many examples as we do with Miyuki. So, and again, like with the last round, it comes down to which of the two do I think is the better husbando. And I think L is amazing. He's one of my favorite characters in Death Note, one of my favorite characters in anime. But as far as being a husbando, I think L's kind of asexual. I don't think he's interested at all in terms of that. So I was also thinking of down the road with the criteria we have left over, would L be able to compete as well as Miyuki? And I don't think he can. So I think when we get down to the nitty gritty, I don't think he can. So I know it's going to be a huge upset, but I'm going to say Miyuki Kazuya going on to the Sweet 16. But I'll just take L for myself and rid you all of the trouble, right? Right? Okay. I know I just took a drink of that beer, but I almost want to take another one because of all the rounds in this entire video, this was the hardest. Because we have two characters who are aesthetically pleasing, super intelligent, trustworthy and dependable, and have a strong individuality. Lloyd Forger and Twilight versus Roy Mustang. And there's a quite considerable difference between the rankings of them, Lloyd is a number 1 seed and Roy is number 8 seed. So if I relied solely on Patreon votes, it would be Lloyd. But I got to thinking about this one, and I thought for days on this one. Like, this one plagued me. I asked Patreon about Roy Mustang. I was like, we know from seeing Spy, like, it's been a while since I've seen Full Metal Alchemist. I've just watched Spy Family, so I know Lloyd as a character. But I asked Patreon if they think Roy Mustang was trustworthy and dependable, and they were like, yeah, he comes across as cold, but that's not the reality. The reality is that he is trustworthy and dependable. He just doesn't want to seem like it. He doesn't want to seem like he cares. But that's similar to Lloyd. So I was like, well, that's just similar to Twilight. Twilight comes across the same way, right? So... And honestly, I feel like Lloyd is a number 1 seed because it was around the time I was watching Spy Family when I put the nominations out. So I know that popularity plays a factor in it. Whereas Roy, he's been on the poll 2 years in a row. Will Lloyd be number 1 next year? I don't know. But I really had to start digging into the manga and anime of Full Metal Alchemist for examples to compare against Spy Family. And I do find that Roy has more moments in the manga and anime where he is trustworthy and dependable and is doing things to help others, whereas Lloyd is just trying... The things he does to help others are in line with his mission. They're in line with the task he has set in front of him. Whereas I feel like Roy goes above and beyond to do things outside the mission to help others that he didn't have to do, but he did anyway. And I feel like we've not gotten that far with Lloyd yet in the series. Now, those of you that are manga readers for Spy Family, you will probably be thinking, oh, well, we'll get to that eventually. And next year, if I do the Husbando poll again and y'all vote for Lloyd, I will probably have more knowledge by then because I'll have seen season 2 in the movie by then, hopefully. But for right now, I feel like digging deep in this example and this round and looking more into Roy, it's got to be him. So I can't believe I'm knocking a 1 seed out. But yeah, Roy Mustang, he's making it to the Sweet 16 on this criteria. I'm like, let's go. Let's do it. So cheers, Lloyd. You join Gojo. You join Gojo in the 1 seeds that have gone down. So far, the only number 1 seeds we have left are Reagan and Lan Wangji. So we'll see how that goes. The final hard round that I had for this version, actually there were 2. We had Nezumi versus Kuromochi. Nezumi from number 6 versus Kuromochi from Ace of the Diamond. This is really hard because Nezumi comes from like an action-oriented fantasy series and Kuromochi is from a sports anime. So they both are intelligent in different ways. I would argue that perhaps this one gets really, really hard because I would say that you could argue Nezumi is more intelligent than Kuromochi. Sure. I would believe you on that. Although he does make some baka moments, number 6. And I would say Kuromochi is maybe more dependable than Nezumi because Nezumi is not exactly trustworthy and dependable. He's a really individualistic character, sure, but he's not exactly trustworthy and dependable. Whereas Kuromochi, absolutely, he would do anything for you. He would help you out in any way possible. And Kuromochi, while he is still a strong individualistic character, does his own thing, doesn't really rely upon anybody. He makes changes for himself. Could you argue Nezumi is maybe a stronger individual? Maybe, but can that be to his detriment? I think that was something to consider too. Like, Nezumi, is he going to be too individualistic where it sacrifices that trustworthiness and dependability? I think it kind of does sometimes. So as much as I like Nezumi as a character, and if we were doing like relationship-wise, him and Shion are like, they're great. But Kuromochi, I feel like, is more of a balanced character in terms of all of those components, whereas Nezumi's kind of the extremes, right? So I'm going to give it to Kuromochi. Ace of the Diamond came out and just got things done in this round. Ace of the Diamond came out and got things done. I don't know how it's going to go the rest of the competition, but this was Ace of the Diamond's day. They came out in droves and they won this round pretty handedly. This next one was really hard. This is the last really hard round. We got one more after this. But Kyo Soma versus Shilian. It's really hard. Because Kyo and Shilian, they're both smart. They both have their moments of ditziness and baka-ness, but they're both smart. They're both trustworthy and dependable, and they're both very strong individualistic characters. But I think for me, it's been a long time since I've watched Fruits Basket and read it. And I really didn't want to get any spoilers because I do eventually want to watch the 2019 version. So I didn't look up for the record, the Fruits Basket characters, I didn't look up any additional research on them because I didn't want to be spoiled in case if I go back and watch the series. So I will give you all that caveat. I did not look up individual information. I just went across memory what I knew from them. And I was like, ugh. So, but Shilian, I would argue that Kyo's problem is that Shilian has 800 years of experience on him. Shilian has more experience of being intelligent, being dependable, and showing his individuality. He like cuts the extreme for all those categories. Like in a previous round, Shilian has a Sharpie and he's just checking those off one by one, right? So I felt like Shilian was able to win this round just on his experience alone and the fact that there are many more examples I have with his character than I do Kyo. So, Fruits Basket, this was not your round. I'm sorry. Maybe if I get a chance to watch the 2019 version, I will change my mind. But for this round, Shilian's going to advance on the Sweet 16. The final round of Husbandos is a Howl Pendragon from Howl's Moving Castle versus Aki from Chainsaw Man. So, about that, this one was pretty hard because Howl, I do like Howl and Aki a lot. They're both, I think Howl and Aki, you could both say are intelligent, sure. I think that Howl and Aki, they both have the ability to be independent. I feel like, yeah, you can make the argument that Aki is codependent upon Himeno, but then you could also say the same thing for Howl and Calcifer. So it's like you're kind of even keel with that, right? They're both dependent on certain people, but at some point they both move on from those people and are able to be their own individuals. So it kind of works out. So then the question becomes about trustworthiness and dependability. And this is what sets it apart from me because Howl is trustworthy and he is dependable. But at some point, Sophie has to come in as a character and assist Howl out and kind of get him out of a rut. With Aki's character, there's a moment where Denji in Chainsaw Man is in a precarious situation and Aki helps get him out of it. So I would say that I would have to go with Aki only because Aki has shown more examples of helping others out of dire situations, whereas with Howl, we've seen others help him out of a dire situation. So, as much as I love both these characters, I'm going to pick Aki. He's going to be our husbando to go on to the Sweet 16. So, there's our Sweet 16 of the band husbandos. I wish I could explain to you the amount of... I sat up late at night. I started watching RuPaul's Drag Race like a week ago. I've never watched it before, but I was sitting there watching it going, Haji, lip sync for your life. I'm just sitting there like trying to figure out what in the world I'm doing. And it was so difficult. But I'm glad we've got to the top 16. So now we have the waifus. Again, the waifus, our top waifus, same criteria. They had to be intelligent. They had to have a strong individualistic personality, and they had to be trustworthy and dependable. That was my criteria for all of them going into these rounds. And I will say, these rounds, I feel like the waifus, they really set themselves apart in this round. I was really happy with the decisions that I made for here. So hopefully you all made the same decisions as well, right? Our first round was Zenin Maki from Jujutsu Kaisen versus Annie Leonhardt from Attack on Titan. Ooh, our cold ladies. I would argue both very intelligent, very individualistic. The question becomes whether they are trustworthy and dependable. I believe that Zenin, faced in any situation, is a trustworthy and dependable person that you can rely upon. Annie, maybe if you're part of her squad, maybe if you're from Parody, sure. But I don't know. Annie, I had to question her trustworthiness. Now, obviously, at this point in the story where I'm at with Attack on Titan, yeah, I think she's trustworthy and dependable. But there was a great deal of time when I thought that wasn't the case. I've never questioned it with Zenin. With Maki, I've never questioned her trustworthiness. With Annie, I have. And that was really the tiebreaker between them. So, as much as I love Annie, I've got to give this round to Zenin Maki. She's going on to the Sweet 16. Then we have the Windmaster, Shi Ching-chon from Heaven Official's Blessing versus Yasano from Bungo Stray Dogs. Oh, Yasano. I love the Windmaster. And I love Yasano. So, the Windmaster and Yasano are both very intelligent. And I would say that they both have strong individual personalities, right? The Windmaster, as much as the Windmaster is friends with everyone, she's able to go off and do her own thing, right? Yasano is very much a lone wolf at times, even though she can rely upon others. So it really comes down to them being trustworthy and dependable. And they both are in some regards. So I was trying to think, as a waifu, between the two of them, what sets them apart from the others. And the Windmaster, I would say that the Windmaster for their character is relied upon and considered dependable by more individuals. They have a bigger social network than Yasano does. And Yasano, yeah, she's trustworthy and dependable. She has to kill you nearly to help save you, but she's trustworthy and dependable. So the fact of Yasano nearly having to kill you in order to help you, and the Windmaster having so many connections, I had to give it to the Windmaster just because they were kind of just more of the total package in terms of being a waifu. But Yasano, I love you, girl. It killed me. But I also love the Windmaster, so it didn't kill me nearly. Thou shalt not die, and I didn't die upon that hill, choosing the Windmaster to go on to the Sweet 16. Next, we have two female characters that are very similar. Kallen from Code Geass and Nobara from Jujutsu Kaisen. Yeah, this was kind of Jujutsu Kaisen's day. At least for the waifus, because I like Kallen a lot. Her and Code Geass, it's been forever since I've watched that show. But I feel with Nobara is one of our main trio, and I like Kallen a lot, but whenever I think of Kallen in Code Geass, I think of her and Lelouch, or I think of her in Zero. I can't quite think of her as an individual by herself. Nobara, she don't need Yuji. She doesn't need Fushiguro. Nobara can do things by herself. The season finale of season 1, where she's just got the rose tattoos and is getting it. Nobara, like, kicking ass and taking names. Like, girl's personality is so strong, so individualistic. Her and Kallen are both smart. You can depend on them for anything. But I just think Nobara, she sets herself apart as a main character a bit more than Kallen does. I feel like as the series as a whole goes, Kallen can kind of fall a little bit back in line of the characters, whereas Nobara sets herself center stage. And I love it. So Nobara, she's going to advance on to the Sweet 16. Next, we have an Attack on Titan showdown between Peak Finger and Mikasa. Whoo! This one's really hard. I'm not gonna lie. This is probably one of the harder waifu categories because both Peak and Mikasa, super intelligent. Both Peak and Mikasa, trustworthy and dependable. Like, you can rely upon them. If you're with Parody, Peak is the anchor, the one you rely upon. If you're with the Survey Corps and you're struggling, Mikasa is one of the ones that you want on your side, and you want her beside you to save your ass. So both of them are so good. So it comes down to like their individual personalities, right? And this gets hard too, because Mikasa, she has struggled with individualism. That's been a big battle for her. And for Peak, she kind of doesn't often act alone. She waits on orders, or she's like a person that's part of a team. She doesn't act on her own. So it's really hard. Both these characters are kind of stuck in the same position. It was really difficult. And I was like, well, if I relied upon the Patreon votes, then Mikasa would win. But I was trying to think if there was any other situations that I could use. And what got me was back in season 1, we saw Mikasa, whenever we thought Eren was gone, Mikasa stepped up and did her thing. She helped out. She tried her best to take charge of the situation and make things work for her comrades. We've not seen Peak have that opportunity. That's the big difference. Mikasa has had moments where she's shown being by herself and having to take charge in a situation. We've not had that opportunity to see that with Peak. Now, if we see that come by the end of the manga, end of the season, Next year might be a totally different ball game. But because we've actually seen examples of Mikasa working individually and being individualistic, I'm going to give Mikasa the edge over Peak. She's going to win this round and move on to the Sweet 16. So next we have Riza Hawkeye. Riza versus Kobeni from Chainsaw Man. I feel so bad for Kobeni because it's kind of like taking a fresh rookie off the streets and pitting her up against an OG veteran. Because Riza Hawkeye, girl, strong personality, smart, trustworthy, dependable. Like she was checking off the boxes with a paintbrush. And then Kobeni, yeah, she's been trustworthy and dependable. We've seen her save people. She seems smart because she's been able to get through situations and rely upon her intellect. And she's been able to work by herself. But it's just not to the level and the examples that we've seen with Riza. I feel like Kobeni, if she got some years of experience under her wing, she'd be able to give Riza a good run for her money. But man, there's just so many examples with Riza in the anime and the manga you can turn to of times when she's helped people out, been individual and strong, and then been intelligent and think up these great situations and strategies that I'm like, I can't choose Kobeni over her. It was just not a possibility. So I love Kobeni. She's so badass, and I want to see her in season 2 of Chainsaw Man. But Riza Hawkeye, girl, our number 1 seed, you are advancing on to the Sweet 16, honey. Like, that just can't get around it. So these next few rounds, I think you could maybe consider upsets, but I'm pretty happy with the decisions made for them. The first round is Cece from Code Geass versus Misa Amane from Death Note. It's really interesting because Misa and Cece on the surface, you question about, like, are they intelligent? Yes. Cece, definitely. Misa, yeah, she doesn't seem like it on the surface, but girl is. Like, she's pretty smart. She's clever. She knows her way around, right? And then both of them are trustworthy and dependable. You can rely upon them as long as they care about you, right? And they're both kind of similar in that regard. So then it comes down to the tiebreaker. Like, are they individualistic and can they stand on their own with a strong personality? And I do think that Misa has a strong personality. However, I think Cece, while you could say Cece is tied very much to Lelouch and Misa is tied very much to Light, lots of similarities there. I do think Misa, she gets kind of clingy. She can be very clingy with Light, very codependent. And while Cece, you could argue, gets that way, I feel like Cece has more moments of her own individuality and working individually and away from Lelouch than Misa does. So it was really hard to pick between the two of them, but I think Cece gives some more examples of being a strong individualistic personality than Misa, so she is going to advance on into the Sweet 16. But Misa girl, this is just not a day for Death Note. Not today at all. This is probably the biggest upset of the entire bracket, if I'm being honest, but Nina Fortner from Monster versus Himeno from Chainsaw Man. I'm glad I've watched Monster up to the point that I have. Yes, because I feel that as much, I've only seen up to episode 18 of Monster at this point, so I don't want any spoilers, things like that. But Nina and Himeno, both intelligent women, both ones that you can depend upon in situations. Like, Nina's gone through self-defense training. She has a good heart. You can depend upon her if you need her. Himeno, she seems kind of shady, but you can depend upon her if the circumstance arises. But when it comes down to being a strong individualistic personality, what I've seen of Nina so far has shown that yes, she is a strong individual. She has gone off by herself. She's done training. She's been able to have her own adventures. She's been able to go off and do her own thing and not have to rely upon anybody. Himeno, her whole character, part of her character design is that she's codependent. And that's kind of part of her story. So as much as I love Himeno and her character, I've got to give it to Nina because Nina is able to show that she's smart, dependable, and can act on her own and isn't codependent. So upset, our 11 seed, Nina Fortner, is advancing onto the Sweet 16 over Himeno. But girl, You may be gone, but like in the anime, you are not forgotten. This was a decision. I'm glad I'm near the end of this bracket. Next, we have Violet Evergarden versus Makima from Chainsaw Man. I don't know if we've had two as different characters on this bracket as we do Makima and Violet Evergarden. They could not be more different. Right? Oh my god, could not be more different. But, I mean, both Violet and Makima, I'm gonna say though, Makima definitely wins in the intelligence department. Makima is like playing 4D chess. Whereas Violet has to rely upon, for most of the series, she relies upon other people's orders, and then she slowly develops her own agency and her own, like, she realizes she is intelligent and can do things on her own. Makima right out the gate is like, I'm playing 4D chess, I've already beaten you, I've played you a second time, beaten you again, and now we're going back for thirds. And it's like, what are we doing? So yeah, Makima's super intelligent. As far as being trustworthy, I think this kind of goes back to the last round. Violet may not have the intelligence category checked like Makima does, but Violet is very much a trustworthy and dependable person. Makima, it kind of depends. If you're on her side and she feels you're valuable, then yeah, she'll be trustworthy and dependable, but she's going to do things on her own terms, and you just got to deal with it. So I feel like Makima has the intelligence category, Violet has the trustworthiness, so then we're left with individuality. What do we do there? And Makima is like the epitome of a strong, independent woman. Makima's like, I don't need no man. I'm going to crush men with my hands and don't care. Whereas Violet, she really is dependent through most of her series until the end when she does develop her own sense of individuality. So if we're looking at characters as a whole, they're really even keel up until that individuality aspect. And then Makima just barely advances over her in terms of that. So she may not be the waifu that you want, but she's the waifu that's going to advance on into the Sweet 16. Makima, she advances on. Next up, we have Masato from Neon Genesis versus Winry Rockbell from Full Metal Alchemist. Man, I love Winry and I love Masato, so this one was actually kind of hard for me because I love both these characters an awful lot. Like, I've almost considered if I ever had a child, I would almost name them Winry if they were a girl because I really like that name and I love Winry's character. Like, that's how much I like her character. But honestly, it's really hard between the two of them. Both Winry and Masato are intelligent. They're both knowledgeable. I think it's funny that, you have Masato in a mech anime with heavy air quotes, and you have Winry who's like deals with mechanical things. Winry would be fun in the Neon Genesis world. I don't know how that'd work out for her, but she'd be really helpful. She'd be one of the mechanics working on the EVA units, right? But they're both intelligent, they are both trustworthy and dependable, and they both have strong individual personalities. So then what do we do with that? Well, Masato, the one aspect about Full Metal Alchemist that I do regret is that Winry is often, she has moments where she works with Alphonse and Elric, or she works with Alphonse and Ed, but she's oftentimes like to the side. Masato is like front and center from start to finish in Neon Genesis. She is at the forefront the entire time. And Winry kind of takes a back seat for a lot of the story. So because Masato is one of the main characters that gives us so many examples of her checking off these boxes, whereas Winry just checks off the boxes, I gotta give it to Masato. I gotta give it to her. So Masato, our girl, advancing to the Sweet 16. But Winry, honey, I love you. And I'm really sad that you're not advancing, but still one of my favorite Full Metal Alchemist characters. Next is Euphemia from Code Geass versus Mirko from My Hero Academia. Again, I had to look up some stuff on Euphemia because it's been a long time since I've watched Code Geass, like 15 years. I was like, what happened with her character? What is her character? Like, Cece's pretty memorable, but Euphemia, I was like, who is she? What is happening? So I looked her up. Euphemia and Mirko, both intelligent characters. They are both trustworthy and dependable, and they're strong individualistic characters as well. What sets Mirko apart from me, though, if I'm being honest, is that for me, Mirko, she literally lost limbs in the manga to protect people around her. Like she's so trustworthy that she will give life and limb to save you. And I don't get that from Euphemia. So it was a really hard and close battle between the two of them. And I thought about it a lot, but I've got to get it to Mirko because she's just so fierce and she's so reliable. Like, part of an entire arc of My Hero Academia is dependent upon Mirko herself. Like, if she hadn't kicked that test tube, if she hadn't done certain things in the hospital, the story would not be where it's at today. So I got to give it to Mirko because of her just pulling extra duty and just doing the damn thing. So Mirko advances on into the Sweet 16. Next, we have Yaruichi from Bleach versus Chao Ling from Link Click. This was not a hard round. I like Chao Ling a lot. I want to see Link Click Season 2 so badly. But man, Yaruichi, girl is fierce, clever, intelligent, individualistic. I'm naming more categories than there are categories because this. And so Yaruichi, she's smart, she's trustworthy and dependable, and she has a strong sense of individualism. Like, Yaruichi left her own clan, did her own thing, and never looked back. Whereas Chao Ling, she very much is dependent upon Chung and Lu for most of the season. So Yaruichi is like a total package in this round. She easily advances to the Sweet 16, but I'm glad Chao Ling got nominated. I'm glad Link Click characters made the poll. I'm hoping we get season 2 this year because I really want to watch it, and I'm hopefully excited for her to come back into the bracket next year. We'll see. Then we have Wen Qing from Modao Zushi versus Bond from Moriarty the Patriot. Whew. Interesting round. I'm glad that Bond made it on both the Husbando and Waifu brackets. I'm glad about that. I really like the fact that Bond is an intelligent character that is trustworthy and dependable and is her own woman or man. So good for Bond. Wen Qing is very smart as well. Like the best doctor of the Wen clan. So of course is trustworthy and dependable. And is individual enough. Like, she stands on her own, right? She's like one of the female characters in the Wing Clan that everybody respects and that kind of elevates her. So I like that about her character. The thing about Wen Qing versus Bond is that Bond, kind of like Sebastian Moran, Bond works kind of as part of a unit, part of a collective. Whereas Wen Qing, she oftentimes stands by herself, even against her own people. Like, Wen Qing will stand against her own people, even if it means death, to save her brother. Like, that's the lengths that she will go to be dependable for her brother's sake. And I can't say that Bond goes through that same path that Wen Qing does. So as much as I love Bond, Wen Qing just, like, she's able to be such a force to be reckoned with in Modao Zushi that I've got to give her the win. She's going to go on to our Sweet 16. I'm excited for these next 2 rounds because I know that the winners of them are going to have to face each other in the Sweet 16, and that makes me really excited. But this next round, oh buddy, I said it was I already said earlier what the hardest round of the waifus were, but this is a close second. It's Yor Forger versus Shilian. Y'all voted Shilian to be a waifu, which I understand. I get it. Shilian is totally a waifu. Honestly, I feel Shilian is more of a waifu than a husbando, but that's my opinion. Y'all made the nominations. So I felt like Shilian versus Yor is really difficult only because of the context that I have for each character. I'm about to read volume 4 of Heaven Official's Blessing. I've read like 800 pages so far of Heaven Official's Blessing, whereas I've only watched 24 episodes of Spy Family. So I can only go off of what I know for each series, right? Now, as far as intelligence goes, I do think Yor is intelligent. I do. Do I think that Shilian is a little bit more intelligent? Yes, but they both have moments where they can be ditzy, so I'll give them both the benefit of the doubt and just give them both the intelligence category, right? We'll just knock it off. Yor is an assassin, so she has to be intelligent in terms of that, and Shilian with his cultivation is intelligent, so we're just going to say both are intelligent. They both check off the box. So then you have trustworthiness and dependability. And I would say that both Yor and Shilian are extremely trustworthy. Like, I could depend on either of them to save myself or to help me in anything that I needed. That's not a question. So then it comes down to an individualistic, strong personality. And this is where I take umbrage with Spy Family. I'm probably going to do a video about Buddy Daddies versus Spy Family at some point over the summer when that series, when Buddy Daddies has ended, because I felt so strongly about it. But my biggest complaint with Spy Family in season 1 is that Yor, in the second half of the season, has nothing to do. She's just sitting around helping Anya. But she's not helping. She doesn't have any assassination missions we can follow. She's not helping Lloyd. She's just kind of sitting around, and she kind of is a sad sack for part of the season. And it frustrates me because I love Yor's character and I want her to do something, but the series won't let her do anything. And it's so frustrating. And with Shilian, the whole story's based around him. So we see him doing lots of different things. And Shilian basically has been by himself for nearly 800 years, whereas Yor has not been by herself in any episode of season 1. So, as Yor was one of the number 1 picks too, her and Lloyd. But I feel like the lack of content I have works against them. I feel like they got the number 1 seed, Yor and Lloyd did. I don't think it was coincidence. I do think they're great Husbando and Waifu nominations. Don't get me wrong. But I think that they're only number 1 seeds because whenever nominations came out, it was around the time I was hot and heavy into Spy Family. I think by next year, I still think they will get nominated and I still think they will go far in the polls. But do I think they'll be the number 1 seed? I don't know. But do I think that Shilian will be a number 1 seed? Unless he wins this year. So Shilian just has more examples, more content to work with. And for that reason, I'm going to have him go over Yor, and Shilian's going to advance to the Sweet 16 of the waifus. We have 3 rounds left, which is probably a good thing. So, cheers. We've got Zhang Yanli, the sweet cinnamon bun of the Zhang clan, sweet innocent sister with her lotus pod soup, versus Reagan Artaka. Y'all voted for Reagan for both the waifu and the husbandos. Don't blame you. After watching season 2, I don't blame you at all. I think he does fit the waifus quite nicely. But yeah, Reagan versus Yan Li. They're both smart. We can say they're both smart. They're both trustworthy and dependable. Absolutely. And so it comes down to their individualistic, strong personalities. And I would say that Yan Li, she gives Reagan a run for his money. She can be individualistic. She can be strong. But again, one of my big complaints with Yan Li is that she gets moments in the novel where she does really cool things. And she does things to like help others around her. And it's really nice. But then she kind of takes a back seat. Reagan is always front and center as a main character. And we see a lot more development with his personality and his like character throughout the series than we do with Yan Li. So it makes it hard to compare when I have so many examples of Reagan working individually and helping others than I do Yan Li. It makes it hard. So as much as I love our girl's lotus soup, I gotta give it to Reagan this round and have him go into the Sweet 16. But that means that Reagan and Shilian are gonna go up against each other next round. How that's gonna work? Oh my god, that's gonna be insanity. Reagan and Shilian. That's gonna be a round to see next round. That's gonna be the one to see for sure. So, our next round is Sasha Browse from Attack on Titan versus Ray from Ace of the Diamond. Our girl Ray. Man, Ace of the Diamond's had a really good day today. They've had a really good round with the husbandos. Will it carry over to the waifus though? Well, in terms of intelligence, I say that Ray has a bit more over Sasha, honestly. Sasha can be kind of a little bit goofy sometimes, right? I think of the potato scene a lot. But I'm not saying Sasha's dumb. She's not. She's smart. She's in the Survey Corps. She's got to be smart. But I feel like Ray is like, she's like pull up your glasses intelligent. Like she's like marketing strategies, has like a master's in business. Like she's ready to go. And Sasha's more like street smarts, right? But Ray's got street smarts too. So it's hard to compare, right? And then we talk about trustworthiness and dependability. Ray is essential for recruiting people to Ace of the Diamond. She is super trustworthy and dependable for being able to recruit people like Miyuki, like Chris, like Sawamura to the team and then be like the best players they have. So Ray is fundamental in her recruitment. And Sasha is super trustworthy and dependable as well. She's saved countless people's lives throughout the series. So you can't say she's not trustworthy and dependable. So then it comes down to their strong personalities. And Ray has a pretty strong personality. She's able to stand toe-to-toe with Kateoka and Ochiai. Like she's the lead lady in Ace of the Diamond amongst this sausage fest of male managers and coaches that stands her ground. And Sasha has a strong personality as well. And she's able to go off and do her own thing. When she rescues Kaya, she's able to go off and do her own thing as well. So Ray and Sasha are pretty on equal footing. But again, if I had relied upon Patreon, Ray would have won because she's a third seed. But as you've seen from this bracket, I've not been relying on Patreon this round at all. And I've had many an upset based on bracket seeding. So where do we go to? And so my criteria for Ray was that, here's my thing. Ray is toe-to-toe with the two main characters of Ace of the Diamond that are adults. Not the kids. We'll leave Sawamura and Miyuki out. But in terms of the adults, Kateoka, Ochiai, and Ray, they are the three that we go to. And there's that other manager that likes Nori. Sure. But she is like toe-to-toe with the big guns. Right? She is not a side character. She's in all the panels, all the things. She is there front and center. Sasha was going to be killed off in season 2. But they kept her around. But there's a lot of times in Attack on Titan that Sasha has nothing to do because she kind of takes a back seat because I feel her mangaka didn't intend on her to live that long. And so when they decided to let her live, they were like, well, I don't have anything for her to do, so we're just going to put her over here for now. Ray is not like that. Ray is at every game in all of the scenes. She's there. She takes kids to the hospital. She is there next to Kateoka. I wish they were shipped together. Like, she is front and center, whereas Sasha can kind of take a back seat. So I had to dig that deep in this round, y'all, to find justification. But I think based on that criteria alone, Ray is going to advance to Sweet 16 over Sasha Browse. Such a hard category. And then finally, we have with our waifus 2 characters that are quite similar. Cheers, y'all. We have Olivier, Mira Armstrong versus Corin from Yona the Dawn. Mira from Full Metal Alchemist versus Corin from Yona the Dawn. 2 women who are actually very similar. Very similar. It's kind of crazy. We have our 10 seed and our 15 seed. Mira and Corin, both very intelligent military-wise, very clever women, both trustworthy and dependable. Their people around them can depend upon them, and they both have extremely strong individualistic personalities. They don't have to rely upon nobody. So this is a really hard round because they are so very similar, right? And if I'd gone with the popular vote, it would have been Mira. But again, I've made it this far without using Patreon as a crux. Why would I start now? So it was like, okay, well, what do I do? So I went back looking at examples from the manga and the anime for each of these characters. And Mira is present for quite a lot of the manga. Like, she's in the final chapters. She's in the final battles. She plays a part. She has ties. Her brother is one of the main characters as well. Like, she has a pretty significant role. And you could argue that Corin does as well, but I feel like Corin is not as prevalent in the series as Mira is. I felt like with this entire bracket for this specific round, I found myself going and finding more and more examples from the anime and manga to back myself up, being like, okay, who do we have more experience with as a character? And for this round, because Corin and Mira were so similar, I wanted to see who had more experiences we could talk about from the series, and it's definitely Mira. So today was Full Metal Alchemist Day, I tell you. Yona the Dawn did well as well, but unfortunately for Corin, I've got to go with Mira in this one. She just has more experience to her name, and she's just, I think, a explicitly shown as stronger character than Corin, but it was really close. So, whew! Oh, y'all. That was our round of 32 to our round of Sweet 16. Uh-huh. What was the alcohol percent on this? What was this? It was 12 ounces, and it was, 8.2! Oh, shit! This is 8.2. That's why I am extremely buzzed, y'all. 8.2, huh? Oh, God. Well, gonna save this for next round for sure. Oh, buddy. Okay, so I feel pretty good now that I have talked with y'all about the Husbando and Waifu brackets. I honestly, coming up with the winners of this round was probably the most I'd say this was harder than last year. Last year, I was just like, okay, which characters? We'll just go with the popular vote from Patreon, and that'll solve all of our problems. Not this round. No, this round, this time around, I was like, no, we're not going to rely upon Patreon votes to break the ties. We're going to find examples to prove the points, and it made this a lot tougher to choose from, but I think the answers and the winners of these categories are a lot more validated, so... But next week will be the top 16 to the top 8. And if I have any ties that I need from here on in, I'm not going to be relying on Patreon votes for the winners. No. From here on in, I'm going to be relying on our philanthropy tiers to help break the tie. So if you're unfamiliar, our philanthropy tier we have on Patreon, it's $1 for Discord, $5 for early videos, a week early than everybody else on YouTube. And then the philanthropy tier is those who pay $10 each month to help support me in what I love doing. And I'm very thankful for y'all for all that you do. Very much so. So our philanthropy tier people that, should I have a tie in the next month, for the next few weeks, I'm going to be relying on you all. So our philanthropy tier people, we have Edgar, Dana, Anime Annie, Larry Manning, Tyrone, and Truck. Thank you all so much for your support. If for some reason from here on in I have any tiebreakers that I need, I'm going to be pulling you all to help figure it out. So we'll see. Maybe I won't need any tiebreakers. Maybe the rounds will just sort themselves out. I don't know. But I hope you all enjoyed as Romania Black got buzzed and talked about these winners, because this was a lot of fun. So next week we'll be down to our Sweet 16. I'm super excited. There's been so many upsets this year, but y'all chose the criteria. What can we do? So I'm excited to see where next week goes. I hope y'all are too. I'm curious to see your thoughts down below. But in the meantime, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and I'll be back very soon with more of our Husbando and Waifu brackets of 2023.